Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning and welcome to VCE Ag Today on October 21st, 2021. We're glad to be joined by Dr. Wade Thomason, Extension Grain Specialist, for a presentation on early season small grain considerations. Before we get started, I just want to review a few housekeeping items. First, we ask that everyone remains muted through the presentation. If you have questions, we will have time at the end to take them or type them in the chat box as we go along. Finally, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to our VCE Ag Today YouTube channel. Thank you, Dr. Thomason, for joining us, and I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Stephanie. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss some early season small grain issues with you guys today. I'm going to switch over and share my screen. I'll bring up some slides for us so that I don't get off track. So is that coming through okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to hit some things that are relevant for fall small grain management here as we're beginning. I suspect being the 21st of October and being another pretty day, I would probably have a lot of folks in the field dealing with either small grains or soybeans at this point in time as well. So hopefully the recorded version of this will still be accurate when people have time to listen. But the first thing I wanted to talk about was planting date. And for those of you that have heard me talk about this in the last year or so, you will recognize these slides. So on the left-hand side, you see that if you go to the date of December 31st and you back up into the fall to the point at which you would accumulate 700 growing degree days, which is, that's fully tillered wheat that we would have grown there. It gives you an idea of what the planting dates would have had to have been if you wanted to achieve that goal of 700 growing degree days. In the left-hand side from 1981 to 2010, and the right-hand side from 2007 to 2017. And if you'll notice, there are the color chart, the heat map is the same among both. And if you'll notice, down in Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, and in the very southeastern tier of counties, there's a week that appears in this 2007 to 2017 data that wasn't there before. And a lot of the coastal plain has moved from being around October 20th to being, that later in the week of the 25th to the 28th. So my point here is that we are accumulating more heat units in the fall in the recent past than we did in the historic past, which has some implications for our planting dates. And the point being is that if 25 years ago, the optimum date in your region was October 21st, these days, on average, it's probably October 27th, 28th, 29th. It's just a little bit later. I know a lot of us looking at some rain coming in early next week. And I guess my message to the group this year is just don't sweat that because I don't think it's going to be an issue for us. We're going to have plenty of time to grow a good small grain crop, even with an early November planting date. Next thing I wanted to hit was something related to variety selection. And obviously, all those variety selection decisions have already been made. But one of the things we can still do is to manage our variety maturity and planting date combinations so that we have, wheat that's ready across a range of a week or 2 weeks in the springtime that helps reduce the harvest burden significantly. And it also decreases the risk of any single event like a late freeze damaging the entire crop. So they just highlighted our heading date here to give you an idea that within the lines that will be successful in Virginia, we've had about a week's difference in maturity from the earliest to the latest. So we do have some choices there to spread out those that maturity and thus harvest date, because that's consistently seems to be one of the biggest issues is getting all the small grain harvested in a timely manner, not having quality losses at harvest time. And this is one tool that we can absolutely use. We get some early stuff in the mix, we have some later stuff in the mix, and that way the crop isn't all ready at exactly the same time. I wanted to talk just a minute about fall weed control with a photo here. And I've told people, many times over the years that, when I first started here, my predecessor, Dan Brand, told me that weed control in wheat was like football. It's a fall sport. And this is a great example of that. This is a picture from Southampton County a number of years ago. And this was a plot where we were actually controlling bluegrass, annual bluegrass in the wheat with osprey. And but what you're seeing there is you see a treated strip, an untreated strip, and another treated strip there in the middle. What you're actually seeing is mare's tail popping through there in the untreated areas. And osprey really has no efficacy on mare's tail, but what it did was it took the bluegrass out, which made the wheat thicker and more competitive, and it shaded out the mare's tail. So that's a great example of managing things in the fall so that we don't have problems in the springtime. And I think that's a big piece, a wise piece of advice to take heed of every year, but especially in fields where there are weed control issues. I know, that all our fertilizer sources are going to be higher than the catchback this year. And we're all looking to save money wherever we can, but there's a caution here in that we did some work over a number of years ago looking at whether or not we needed fall nitrogen on wheat. And, corn, following corn mostly, but following soybeans and some other kind of what I think is representative of our cropping systems in Eastern Virginia. If we didn't put on nitrogen in the fall, we gave up nearly 9 bushels to the acre when we applied 30 pounds pre-plant. So my point is that I wouldn't skip that nitrogen application in the pre-plant program to wheat or barley unless I have the soil nitrate sample from the top 6 inches and they're quite high. So if we've got more than 30 parts per million, then there's no need to apply nitrogen. And that happens sometimes, especially after we have a weak or a failed corn crop. A lot of nitrogen cycling in that system, a lot of leftover. Maybe you don't need this, but the majority of the time we do. And if we try to skip it, it ends up typically being quite costly. Okay, the next thing is getting a good stand. I have been told, and I absolutely believe, that by the time the grain drill leaves the field, so you've made your variety selection, you have put out your pre-plant fertility, and you've seeded the crop, more than 50% of that yield potential for that crop is set at that point. So this is a really crucial time for us to do a good job related to this. One of the things that we need to do a good job on is seeding rate. We know we need 30 vigorous seedlings per square foot to achieve optimum yields. Because germination and emergence aren't 100%, that means we need to calibrate the drill for 30 to 35 seeds per square foot, excuse me. Obviously, since our seeder's not planting in a square foot, but in a row, we've got those conversions there. So in 7.5 inch rows, we're at 20 to 22 seeds per foot a row planted timely. As we go later, we're going to get less tillering, so we need more seeds, so we get more main stems. So we'd increase that 10% at 2 weeks and then another 10% at 4 weeks late, just to try to make up for some of that reduced tillering. It's really important that we pay attention to that seeds per pound number and not pounds per acre or bushels per acre in terms of seeding rate, because seed size varies dramatically. It varies dramatically between varieties, and it varies dramatically for a variety over years. So if you're keeping seed from one year to the next, you can't rely on that seed count from previous years to provide an accurate assessment of seeding rate. And as an example of a volumetric version of this, this is the same size graduated cylinder, exactly the same number of seeds in there. Obviously, you've got some bigger seeds on the left, some smaller seeds on the right. And so this can make a huge difference. It's not at all difficult to overseed by 10 to 15%, costing yourself yield potential, or overseed 10 to 15% if you have a really small seeded line and you're just spending money that you didn't need to spend. So this is one of those times where getting this right can set up the crop for success, or it can set you up for a situation where you're going to have a problem that you're going to have to try to recover from for the entire season. We do have a listing here of a conversion from seeds to pounds of seed per acre, 60 bushel unit equivalents, and this publication is up on the extension site. So these conversions are available if you if you need to know how much seed to order or make that work. This is out there. The next thing, and one of the more common things I see, although it probably shouldn't be this way, is an issue of barley yellow dwarf virus in both wheat and barley. Barley yellow dwarf virus is vectored by the barred cherry oat aphid and the English grain aphid. These little guys crawl around and suck nectar sugars out of the plants. But at the same time, they oftentimes pass this virus from one to the other. It's characteristic in the center picture here at the bottom with these red tips that you would see in the springtime. And that's the biggest issue with this disease, right? Is that most of the time the damaging infection happens in the fall, but you don't see any of the symptoms of it until the spring. And then you go out and you realize, oh, I've got a problem, but there's nothing I can do about it now. I needed to have been doing something in the fall. So we need to be aware of that. I'm going to pull out some old data that Ames Herbert did 20 years ago, but I think it's still very relevant. We were looking at timing of treatment with insecticides. And so as we go through the season here, these plots had aphids, they had barley yellow dwarf virus. And so, they were at threshold. So they needed to be treated. And that threshold is 20 to 30 aphids per foot of row in the fall. So we can tolerate a fair number of them. With wheat being a little bit more valuable this year, you might want to bring that threshold down a little bit. But it's not as if you find one aphid and need to spray the field. They need to be there in significant numbers. Let's talk about control measures. So in this particular case, we used Gaucho, which is a brand name for imidacloprid, I think, which is just a seed treatment insecticide. And obviously, we got really good yields there with 100 bushels per acre. Ames was trying to prove a point here. He sprayed some at planting when there was no crop and no aphids, and obviously it did no good. He sprayed in November twice, at 3 lease and then at Tillering at the end of November, and saw the highest yields. If we waited till spring, yields fell off more than 10 bushels per acre and were similar to the untreated by the time you waited till the end of March. Point here being, aphid control is also a fall sport. And this is one of those things where everybody gets busy in the fall, days get a little bit short. It's easy to not scout fields and look for bugs. But if they're there, they're going to be costly, most likely. And so we need to be aware of that. We either need to make sure we're scouting those fields in the fall and applying insecticides as needed, or we're using these seed treatment insecticides to protect the crop. And that's a really good idea if, for whatever reason, we're not going to scout or not going to be able to scout the fields, then, but since those products have some generics available, it's less expensive than what it once was. Moving on to another piece of management for us. It's not uncommon for us to have reduced tillering and maybe a little bit of a worse stand in no-till seedings, like on the right, versus conventional till seedings or minimum till seedings on the left-hand side there. And the reason for that are multitude. One is, of course, you've got that residue actually interfering with the seeding operation. And so maybe the depth's not as good as it could be. Maybe seed gets covered up. Maybe there's some little bug that lives under there that eat that germinating seedling. But the bigger thing in terms of growth is that those no-till fields just tend to stay cooler in the fall. So the field on the left there is, all that open soil is absorbing sunlight during the day and absorbing heat. And on the right-hand side, you have all that residue, and that's reflecting that sunlight and that heat back into the atmosphere. And so scientists at University of Kentucky have found, a 3 to 4 degree difference at the canopy height in temperature between conventional and no-till, with the conventional ground being 2 to 3 degrees warmer at dawn in the mornings, which results in significantly more growth in the fall. So we've got a couple of tools that we can use to help combat this. One is, well, again, there's several. Earlier seeding, get that crop going a little bit earlier so that it has more time to accumulate those heat units. The other thing that's out there is increase the seeding rate slightly to try to make up for any issues where we have gaps. And the other thing that we've been working on now for several years and a number of growers have adopted is what I would call a Thanksgiving or deer season nitrogen application rate. In this particular case, I have that, we call this advanced management and standard management. But in all these cases at this point, the only difference between the standard and the advanced at this time in the season is that we put 30 pounds of nitrogen on in late November, and we got a 10 to 20% increase in tillering in the springtime. So my point is that, if the crop canopy isn't where we want it to be and the tillering isn't as aggressive as we'd like for it to be in mid to late November, a small application of nitrogen, 25, 30 pounds, can really boost that growth and get that canopy development and the number of tillers up where we want it to be there in early spring. Now, the one caveat to this, I would say, is that, we typically say, a general rule of thumb is don't exceed 120 pounds of nitrogen in the spring on winter wheat total. Well, if you put 30 pounds on in December, I add that to the spring total. So I would bring my spring total applications down to no more than 90 additional. So that 120 is everything after pre-plant, because otherwise we have lodged some wheat with excess nitrogen application in that pace. So I think it's fine to do. I think it's beneficial in many instances for us in terms of increasing our plant canopy development. I also, though, we need to subtract that off of the total for the total spring need. So that's it for me in terms of like late fall, early winter stuff. I'd be happy to answer any questions or talk about anything else you guys want to discuss.
Thank you, Wade. Are there any questions out there? If you have a question, you can unmute yourself and ask that question.
Hey, Wade, I've got a question for you. I've been receiving this from a good amount of farmers. Here in our area, we've had a good deal of issues with fall armyworms in pasture as well as in turf. Do you see that being an issue in small grains by any chance?
It's very possible. I think it's going to depend on when we have when we have a good freeze.
Mm-hmm.
We've got that crop up and it's aggressively growing before the worms are out of here. Yeah, they can certainly be a pest.
Okay.
I've got a question for you too, Wade. I know you were showing seeding rates there. What would be the maximum seeding rate that you'd recommend if you were trying to compensate for like a low germination rate?
That's actually not an easy question to answer. We have some farmers in the northern end of the Shenandoah Valley who plant wheat after soybeans for lots of reasons, but the main reason is that corn comes off late enough that the stalks are still green. It's really a difficult seeding issue. So they plant behind beans and into mid-November in those northern counties. And those guys do fairly well, but they've got seed basically stacked on each other in the row. And I've never seen any harmful impacts from that. So I don't know that there is a point where you're going to cause yourself any trouble. I think, the question around, especially something with low germ, is, you want to be accurate. You don't want to put more than you need just because of the time and cost. But I don't think you're going to do anything detrimental by putting more seed out there than you need.
Thank you. Other questions? I don't see any in the chat box.
Wait, I got a question a little off topic. What's the timeline looking like for the updated agronomy handbook?
So the goal I had set was the end of the calendar year. I'm not sure we're going to make that. Everything except a handful of like conversion pages and that sort of stuff has all been sent to the editors in the contract editors that work for VCE. But I haven't gotten a lot back from them in the recent past. So I'm waiting on edits to come back from them to circle back to the authors and then put in the final form. Like I said, I hope that we're ready to put that thing out in early January, if not shortly thereafter.
That's great. I know it's a complicated process of back and forth there.
It's the formatting is the biggest issue. It's not the content,
Right.
as you well know.
Yeah, all too well.
If that turns out to be the case, one of the things that we're planning on doing is offering a couple of sessions in basic agronomy training, so sort of agronomy 101 at both the annual conference and then as an in-service, basically teaching, I don't know, they're all beginning agents, but not necessarily new agents, but maybe beginning ag agents, how to use the tools that are in the agronomy handbook, along with a few other things.
That sounds pretty good, Wade.
Yeah,
Other-
I hope it will be. Yeah. Well, again, I appreciate you guys joining in today, and I hope there's something useful in this for someone. As always, I'm available for you guys via phone call or email anytime.
Well, Ray, we appreciate you being here, certainly. And just as a reminder, this presentation was recorded and it will be posted on our VCE Ag Today YouTube channel, as well as on Facebook. I also want to thank the production team of extension agents, and that would be Robbie Longus, Laura Maxine, Trent Jones, and Frank Long. If you can, please take some time to evaluate us using the link or scan the QR code. We do use these evaluations to get suggestions for topics and to improve our program from week to week. Lastly, our next session will be on Thursday, November 4th at 9 a.m. with Dr. David Holzhauser, and he will be discussing soybean variety selection using the new Mid-South Variety Trial Database. I appreciate everyone joining us this morning, and I hope that you have a fantastic Thursday.
Thanks. You guys take care.